Coming to our fourth installment of the speaker, means as we all saw, those of you who are still over here, I think most of you are still over here. We started with the big picture with John sir about the existential nature of man and our curiosity and imagination and channel into the innovative ways. Then we went a little bit more nearer, converging it with Parish Hannah's elements of what this ecosystem is, the AI structure, the needs, the recreational, the outdoors. Then we came at Pat and talked about the vehicle as such, both exteriors, interiors, and then how other industries are learning from it. And now I think last and absolutely the best, I should not say that, but is going to be, I would say, Dave's interpretation of what's happening right now in this world of mobility and how we look at it or how he is looking at it. I think we don't need any more introduction. Most of you know Dave, or you have heard about him or read about him on his bio. Dave, the floor is yours. Feel free to share your slides, and let's try to keep some time at the end for Q&A.
All right, absolutely. I will try and move through this quickly, and there's a lot of exciting content that I want to share here. Just kind of moving through some thoughts that have been developing over the last few years, and then kind of how this past year of this pandemic has changed that, and and so part of this theme of mobility and where is mobility going in the future. I am an automotive enthusiast. I have a sports car. I love to drive, but designing for the driver is going to be a niche component of automobile and mobility in the future. And so just looked at the word occupant. And if we design for occupants, sometimes just looking at definitions of the word, something jumps out at you. And what really caught me here was the end of the definition here, where it says a given time, a person who resides in or presents themselves in a house or a vehicle or a seat or a place at a given time. And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought about time. And so much of our product design is rooted in how much time we have in a given experience. So whether we're really considering the first impression of a product, the usability of a product, where do we store it, how do we come back to it later, what's our long-term impression, so much of this is rooted in how long each of those pieces of the experience are. So I kind of started thinking about time here, and what if you have 15 minutes of free time? And so we're thinking about new mobility, um, and if we have 15 minutes, we have 30 minutes, or you have 45 minutes. What I choose to do with myself during that time changes as those increments go up. And I think we have to design with those types of parameters almost in consideration. What's a 15-minute ride as an occupant look like? And how does a person go through this kind of value equation in their mind as to what I might choose to do? And what do we choose to design for their experiences given those different amounts of time? So part of it to me is also what's our value of time a year later after working from home. I think a lot of us say, wow, I mean, I don't waste my time commuting to the office every single day. I mean, sometimes we're going to the office. Some people are now back to mixed week models. Some people are back to work only when necessary, and they're working from home most of the time. And most of us here probably are at home right now. So I'm not sure I want to give up that hour or hour and a half or 2 hours for some people of time. So I think we've realized we kind of reclaim that time, and I'm not sure I want to give it back. Is my thought.
Me
So
too.
right. So as an automobile industry or as a vehicle design mentality, we have to go forward making sure that when we now take that time back from people to put them back in a vehicle, as autonomous capabilities come forth, there's going to be new value equations that are happening in people's kind of value structure as to what we do with that. So I broke out a couple perspectives here that I think anyone can consider when designing new vehicle experiences for the occupant. And one is Is it an owned vehicle or a rented vehicle, or rented or ride share or any other model you want to talk about where you don't own that vehicle? And part of that is, and we forget this often, which is, where do I bring my stuff? It's my stuff. I want to put stuff in my vehicle. But if I'm in a ride share, I don't leave anything behind. It has to come with me. So that experience nugget right there can really change how you design that interior space, whether I'm owning or renting and I can bring stuff with me or I can leave it in the vehicle later. And so, an example is that I have a daughter, and as any parent here knows, I have less time for hobbies. I used to play bass all the time, and I very frequently, or very rarely now, get that moment to play the bass. I would love if you gave me 30 minutes a day in the car to bring my instrument along. Now, if I own the vehicle, I can leave it in the parking lot. But if I'm in a rideshare scenario, I've got to now bring it with me. And I've got to bring it, what, to a meeting? I'm going to walk into that meeting and have my bass with me on my back and say, hey, I just used the last 30 minutes to play my bass on the way to this meeting. So mind if I put it down? I mean, we're trying to talk about all these enabled new experiences, but if you don't consider all of the touch points along the way, you maybe don't enable that experience. Or mobile gym. I mean, this has come up a lot of times. If you Google mobile gym right now, this is what comes up. I mean, these are hilarious. These like shuttles that people are turning into mobile workstations. And actually, the number one market for these is like celebrities. Celebrities will rent these and have them brought to like a movie shoot site so they can continue to work out while they're on site at a movie shoot. But people have said, well, man, if I have 30 minutes in the car, I'd love to just set up a row machine or something. So I googled row machines, and this came up here, and there's patents for this thing. And I mean, it's not like you're going to really power the vehicle with the rowing, but man, I mean, you could probably put a seatbelt on and safely have a row machine in a rideshare vehicle. And but then what you have to say to the person is, you're going to show up sweaty, and do you bring your gym bag along? And so there's all these pieces to the whole story. And Pat said this, and I love, Pat, you're so right, which is, in automobile design, we often forget the story. What is the entire story that we're building our potential design opportunities around? So, own versus rent, what model are we designing for, and do you align with that scenario? The next one is public versus private. And that means, are you designing for someone who's alone or with others? Because as soon as you're with others, you change your behavior. We all do as human beings. We act differently when we're alone versus when we're around other people. So, are you asking someone to eat alone or with others, or sleep alone or near other people, or working, shopping? I think these are all things we've talked about in a new, mobility commerce opportunity model. But if I'm in a rideshare scenario, it might be a little different. I might not feel comfortable shopping for something, that have a stranger sitting next to me and they can see my phone. But if I'm by myself, maybe I would. So I think we have to consider the fact that the future of ride sharing, or future of mobility, has to be considered in the context of how many people are around you, and are you riding alone or by yourself. So I mean, we could think about, this is a beautiful marketing ideal of what we all think riding buses would be like, right? A bunch of beautiful 25-year-olds out taking mass transit. This is a marketing photograph. This is not really happening, right? I mean, we all know that mass transit really looks like this. This is the reality of mass transit, okay? And so the context of how we behave when we're just around strangers is very different, and everybody kind of closes their circle of of perception very close to whether what you're looking at on your phone, or what you're reading. And now, obviously, with germs and face masks, that denseness is even getting closer. So we have to think about that as we design going forward. Something here at GVAC, you said this once as you and I were talking, and just having one of our deep design conversations, and you said at all times somebody's either waiting or doing, and it just stuck with me, and I wanted to throw that up here because I love that point of waiting versus doing. You're you're in one of those camps. at all times. So, hey, everybody here that's on this conference, you're doing something. But when you go to the Costco gas station, that line is so long. You spend a lot of time waiting just to do something and pump your gas. So both scenarios though need to be designed for. And driving is the current doing paradigm in mobility in cars right now. You're driving now. We're transitioning into things like Super Cruise and Tesla autonomous co-pilot mode, and trying to say, well, okay, are we giving back a little bit of that time? Are we allowing drivers to transition away from that and kind of stepping into that occupant mode? So, hey, when you were talking earlier about the, Elon Musk's quote of, 2037 autonomous vehicles would be as ubiquitous as riding a horse. I mean, I hope so. I love that future ideal, and then we'll all be able to be occupants when we want. And I'll be a driving enthusiast and drive my Celine Mustang when I want to as well too. I have the choice to do both. Um, but just getting into this part of it though about the time piece of it. When do you go in a vehicle trip length from killing time waiting to actually decide to do something? I think this is a really, really interesting just piece of psychology on human behavior. If you give me 15 minutes of time, it's kind of like that point where I'm not sure I'm going to actually do anything. I might just kill it. And what I mean by kill it is like pick up my phone, basically, is what everybody does. If you're stuck somewhere for 10 minutes, it's not really enough time to like engage in something. So I think though, if you move over to 30 minutes, now you start to kind of tip over to like, okay, 30 minutes is too much. I don't have 30 minutes to waste in my life. So if you give me 30 minutes, now I'm going to do something. And there's so many like, articles and all this self-help about, the best ways to spend your time. Or, if anybody here, scrolls through LinkedIn, you see posts all the time about, habits of successful people and whatnot. And now we know we have this time to work from home and make the most of that. So I think we've almost even learned more about little increments of time and how to make most of that. So I think then that starts to become this point where we have to design for the time intended to be in that vehicle. If it's 10 minutes, you're probably just killing it. But when you tip over to that point where now it's meaningful, I might do something. So I'm sharing here a little animation of a design I did for a client looking at um, urban mobility solutions and utilizing ride sharing. And we talked about, well, what if the mobile conference room now actually went around and picked up your clients, and you had your meeting on the go, and by the time the meeting was done you're dropping everybody off, so you have that opportunity to come together, you have your meeting, you have that more enriching, engaging human to human experience. But think about spaces in Shanghai where office space is super valuable, but yet it takes 2 hours to get across town. There's market opportunity for a product like this. So we were looking at glass displays and transparency and privacy and all that kind of stuff. But it was just a really fun activity to look at the type of experiences you could have in a new interior architectural space of automotive. So again, this waiting versus doing, I love this part of like, okay, well, what if we now have a new value equation? Maybe my commute is 24 minutes, but I actually want it to be 30. Or if I had a meeting every morning that was 45 minutes, I want to get in the vehicle. I want the meeting and the ride to actually be in sync. So I get to my destination at the right time. Like, right, I don't want to arrive with 12 minutes left in my meeting. It actually becomes a struggle in how I figure out what to do with my segmented pieces of time every day. So what if you could actually book rides based on time, and the ride maybe was actually cheaper if it was longer, because the operator could operate the vehicle with electrical power more efficiently. So your average speed was reduced to say 47 miles an hour instead of 70 miles an hour. And because you consumed less energy operating at a slower speed, maybe it actually was cheaper to take longer. I mean, what a novel idea, right? But I think being able to control your time to travel is a really new future mindset. And it's completely not how we think about it right now. And the other thing though we have to really consider is what can you do, but what can't you do in a moving environment? Because some people just can't really enjoy moving environments because of the dynamics of motion. You know, some people have so much motion sensitivity that they can't even read in a car. Um, I have a family member who cannot turn backwards for more than like 15 seconds at a time to talk to somebody behind them in a moving vehicle, or they completely get disoriented. So, this is a huge opportunity, I think, for businesses in suspension systems or seat design or even HMI, glass displays, smart glass to really understand the human limitation of performing what we want to do in a car. It's not just a moving living room. It's got inertia and momentum and tipping and all this stuff. So I think that's really something that needs to be considered. So kind of summarizing these, I put them here as the 4 points that if I were designing future mobility experiences, I would really start by answering each one of these questions to say, who am I designing for and how do I make that targeted towards the right need on each side of these kind of equations. So I have some more thoughts going into like this cool like little experiment I did. But any thoughts, Jivak, here?
No, no, you're good. Means you can keep on continuing. I think there are a couple of thoughts that just come to the mind. But if you have something more to say,
Okay.
then go ahead.
Yeah. So then because of the last year, you know, we're more sensitive to our use of time. So we're really looking at compelling experiences. And there's, you know, there's this desire to get away, right? I mean, I think kind of as friends, we've all talked about this, like, oh, actually, it was nice to go to the office yesterday and get out of the house and you know, going to a museum if you can, or just being able to get back inside a restaurant is like, whoa, this is a cool interior space. And so I think we're all excited to, you know, about getting into unique and compelling spaces, but also still being productive. So I think the vehicle of the future needs to be designed from the inside out, truly. And these should be looked at as architectural spaces and opportunities like an interior designer approaches a purposeful room with form and function. And I was looking at just really amazing pieces of architecture. And you know, if you walk into a museum or some auditoriums and or lobbies in some hotels, and you kind of have that moment where you step in and you just kind of look up and you have that ah, moment and the lights coming in and it's like almost angels are singing.
Dave, you have a good voice. I think apart from guitar, you should start singing too.
I don't know if that's, you know, something that exists stepping into a car. I mean, there are great car interiors, but it's a totally different, you know, you're missing the grandness of architecture that happens in really amazing spaces, or playing with light. Like I love the way these couple shots here showcase the intentional way of cutting the light, so as the sun comes through and it shifts, it really changes your impression of the space. And the other thing I think is that when you have an interesting interior lighting maybe perspective, the shape of the exterior also becomes really interesting. So I went through a series of just design explorations, and this is really outside of my normal way of designing a vehicle, but I think it was really fun. And so I went into CAD, and as Pat was talking about it, I designed these really conceptual physical forms in CAD, and then threw it in KeyShot and used KeyShot to render this. And my thought here was, what if this was what a sunroof looked like? I've never seen a sunroof like this in a car, but man, that would be great if you walked in and you looked up in a ride share van or something, and this is what the top of a shuttle bus or, you know, a 6-person van looked like, or even just a long Escalade length. I mean, they're so long you could easily get this kind of dynamic shape in that proportion. And I thought, man, why not? I mean, that would be such a cool way to see the light come in and just, you know, bring your attention upward. And so then I kind of turned that, well, what does that mean for the exterior of the vehicle? And I just created these non-traditional vehicle shapes. But if we're not looking at this from driving and we're looking at this from ride sharing, maybe there's a different exterior form language that comes from this. So I just created a little name here for the theme, energize, and maybe this is To me, this was the vehicle. If I was going out for a night out with my wife or my buddies, this is the vehicle I'd want, and I'd want to step in and see that amazing a roof architecture and have this kind of dynamic experience going on. But if I was commuting, what if I was in an environment that was something I could adjust, and I actually wanted to in here kind of enclose it, and I'm leaving the city. I've had, too much urban chaos going on around me, and using smart glass technology or opacity control, I just wanted to see through this little hole in the ceiling. And as I kind of get out of the city, and if you've ever been to San Francisco, you go through the city, you cross over the bridge, and you kind of end up in an area that's very, redwood forest and some interesting environments there. So maybe as my commute evolves away from the city back out to my home in the country, I drop the opacity down and I can see around me. It's just a really cool space. And what form would that look like? I mean, in a way, this looks to me more like a futuristic snow boot or some weird sneaker, but I think it would be really cool if this is what, my commuting vehicle looked like.
Or a Dutch wooden slipper.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it's a clog or um, and kind of playing around the idea of the new round table, bringing together people to have conversation and have a dynamic space to meet with each other inside a mobile space and having these round windows. I mean, there's no cars with any round windows. Every window in a car is based on a square or a parallelogram of some type, and I would love to see round windows. And then, what if this was what you looked up at then, and you had this kind of slit down the middle and two halves of a vehicle, and there was this kind of tension between circles and straight lines happening. And so then this was what the exterior potentially could look like. And then I was thinking about just entertainment experiences, and kids watch, you know, back of headrest little screens, but what if the whole interior was like a mobile theater for road trips? I mean, to me, this is where I'd want to just lay back if I don't have to drive for 3 hours on a highway heading out on a road trip, and the whole family is in like stadium seats, and we're just watching a movie. And then you've got so much space on the ceiling that you could like create kind of this lattice structure or trussing here that just brings light in a really cool way. So then here's maybe this form of this entertainment vehicle, and it's slanted down because of the stadium seating inside here that leads towards that theater screen in the front of the vehicle. So just having fun with this, and sometimes part of what makes an environment interesting is the shape with which you look out to it. So this kind of encapsulates speed form, but like really changing the dynamic of the window shapes. Again, kind of not just a circle and not just a square like windows and cars are now, but something totally different. Or the land yacht. I mean, if you're ever driving around Colorado or the PCH, you just want to see everything around you. And what if the interior kind of became more like this mid-century modern inspired land yacht, and you were, you know, this is what you rented when you went on a road trip. I think would just be really cool.
I would absolutely love that.
So that was kind of just my fun exploration there, and I thought it'd be, it just really resonates with our philosophy at Summer for R, which is being something special to someone. And I do see a future where these use cases become more marketed and developed and designed for these nuanced and niche experiences, and there's so much more bifurcation in the market, and brands are going to have to target unique experiences. And it kind of goes back to that breakdown I had earlier about what are you designing for, and you need to target each one of these and define where your product opportunity is special and unique and matches your value. And if you hit all these, you could go into any one of those concepts I was just showing, because they all have different use cases, they all have different experiences, and they all convey different motions, from something energetic to something calming. So that's my kind of just piece to share with the group today, and I was happy to share that. It was fun.
Awesome. Again, Dave, there is so much to share or so much to learn each and every time we have these discussions as such. But the I think the breadth of the elements that you were saying about finally going down to the main crosshair, and that is literally a design for the occupant and starting from, I would say, inside to out, right? Means, and that's what typically I would say has happened. Means I do not. I think just to create and I would not say. Can I share the screen, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll stop so you can share something.
So just actually to your to the exact elements that you were mentioning about designing from inside out, as Pat was saying, or right now as you're demonstrating, even the so this is again Sundberg-Ferar did the BART, the BART in San Francisco. The entire, and this was 55 years ago, maybe a little bit more. The entire distinctive factor of this actually won the competition, and eventually it's on the roads or on the tracks right now, is because it was designed inside out. It was literally, it is the only transit system which has its own gauge. So it's not borrowing the meter gauge that was already there. It was designed with the occupant, two occupants, the seats around them, the aisle length, and now this is a new distance coming in, where design actually told in a very good way, engineering, to change the gauge of the tracks to make sure this can go up and down. And that even right now, thinking about this, like how people must have literally understood the power of being designed for the occupant, and then trying to see how we can put the enclosure around it. It has happened then, and right now, Dave, you are literally propounding the exactly same thing. I wanted to just put that analogy from 60 years ago till right now.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect one, and a huge success story. I mean, it's actually kind of crazy if you go to when you go to San Francisco and you see those trains. I mean, they need to be refreshed because they're decades old, but they've actually lasted that long. I
They
mean, just
lasted that
testament
long.
to the quality of the design is that they were so good and they work so well that they've been using them for decades and decades and decades. And you know, the proportion is noticeably wider
Yes.
when you're on a BART train versus go over to the East
Precisely
Coast.
because of the exact notion that you have stating is about inside out, you and Pat. There are plenty of questions, not only from right now the panel, but questions that people have asked as they were coming in and RSVPing in for the last month. So I think I will pick some of the questions from them. But one more element that you mentioned, Dave, that was right on, is about the behavior of people changes when you are in a different cluster. And I think I should put the note to this person. So Stanley Milgram, he was a Yale professor. He did work in 1961, 62, just not just to typically see how people influence differently. So we all think that we are a product of our own intentions and value structures, but no matter what, to unbeknownst to you, you always behave differently because of the situation you are in. So actually, he did plenty of work in people on bus, people in elevator, people changing their behavior, and it happens too, right? Means if we are talking there in a locker room, our talks will be different. If we are, let's say, a cop stops you, you are a completely different person. You are
Yep,
at a funeral, you're a different person. The
yep.
public setting is different. In your pajamas is different. So and understanding, a designer's understanding is not about that core person, but understanding that person, the persona in that ecosystem, and how it's going to be pushed and pulled by plenty of different things. So those are some really strong points. I will try to pick some questions which I know you apart
Yeah,
from.
I think I've over the years I'll see at a trade show or a conference or something somebody present a cool idea, and I'll just sit back there sometimes and I'm like, when is that ever going to actually happen? That like magical moment where somebody is going to put forth so much effort that they're going to actually do what your cool idea is. I mean, it might happen in a vacuum, but I think we often ask too much out of the consumer. We ask a lot of our consumers a lot of times, and it's like, so many of the concept cars or things that we see, they're just kind of spewing out these amazing aspirational like potential ideas,
Yeah.
and yet at the end of the day, I'm sitting there going, well, that might work in like 1% of the time that I'm actually going to experience that, and I don't know if anybody really would do that if they're near somebody else, right? So like Oh, would I actually do that if I was around strangers? Maybe not. And now if I'm ride sharing all the time, I could always be around a stranger. So is that opportunity ever going to really manifest itself? Probably not. So that's where I feel like we miss the context a lot of the whole ecosystem of the product that really is important.
Context will always be the king. There are a couple of questions here from Khalid. What are the biggest challenges in getting broader market acceptance for collaborative vehicles? It might be robots, unmanned, or rideshare. So, like, how do you drive adoption for getting broader market acceptance? Can
One,
design.
I think you have to present clear and compelling use cases. So it's not just that aspirational story we see sometimes, but it's something that's relatable in your marketing material, your design story. You have to give that compelling use case that actually says to the average person, the mass person, why will this make an impact to my everyday? And if you can't, then you really need to know that niche market you're going after. So when you say mass market appeal, then I say, okay, well, you need to understand mass behavior and the barriers to entry for whatever product you're developing. And if you can't, then that's fine. There's people that have very niche, very specific, very targeted use cases, and they can succeed. Your revenue potential is smaller, but your focus might be better. So that's why I say when you go through that matrix I put up there of deciding where you land on those left side versus right side versus questions, that will help you determine where are you going with this. And I think that's what it is. As Pat was just saying, it's about telling that story. So this is something we came across in like just the Elevate project. Why does it you need a car that can walk? That question, I throw that out to family and friends while we were developing it, and they would go, "Wait, why are you? Is this a real transformer? Like, why are you developing a car that could walk?" And as soon as I tell them a couple of the use cases we researched, they go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, how many times have you seen a car off 696 in Detroit, that's a highway, in the middle of winter that got stuck in the ditch? It never actually hit anybody. It never hit the wall. It's not damaged. It's just 7 feet off the road and stuck there now for hours. What if that vehicle only needed to be able to like get up 2 feet off the ground and crawl its way back up to the highway, and you're on your merry way?
And
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
you're exactly solving the element of time as a currency. We are not going to stuck over there. It's a burden for other vehicles to come. It's a hindrance for other, an obstruction for other drivers for their safety. And those are beautiful cases.
Yeah, and sure, you might be able to get a tow truck in 696, but if that happens out in the middle of Michigan on your way up north, and it happens in the middle of the night, you're in a life and death scenario.
Yeah.
So you start to paint pictures like that, and then people are like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." So to me, right, it's all
That's
about really telling the whole use case story. To
I love that answer. One more question from James. How do you walk the line between adhering to established corporate branding versus pushing the brand to innovate new territory?
branding itself is such a wow. That really gets into like a whole nother conversation because right, is it a brand that is a quality brand that you need to stick to it, or you might be in a position where it's a brand that needs a restart or a refresh? So to me, I think you have to start with that question from a branding perspective: is do you need to stick with core values of that brand and then innovate within that umbrella, or do you see yourself as an opportunity where this brand needs a restart? It needs to really stir the pot. It needs to make a splash in the market, and then you can see where your kind of boundaries are. So once you know your boundaries, then I'd say you kind of have the comfortability of where you're innovating in for that brand. What was another part of that question?
So I know it was you answered it rightly. It was how do you walk the line between adhering to established corporate brand versus pushing the brand to innovate new territory?
Well, I mean, and we always, Jivak, and our team, we always say you have to be okay with having people hate your brand.
Absolutely.
That is really something that's hard to get people to do, which is sign up for knowing if you create a compelling product, some people will hate it. And there are some executives that are like, no, no, I will not do that. I don't want anyone to hate our product because that means I've written them off as a potential customer. And we would come back and say, okay, what's your market share? 7%? You have 7% of the market share. What if I told you you could double that? If you told anybody you could double their market share, they would sign up for that in a second. They'd sell their soul. Double your market share. But what if you said to get to 14%, I'm going to have 20% of the market hate your product, literally hate it, go online, troll it, just, bash your product. There are some that would say, well, no, no, I can't do that. There's no way I would do that. I don't want to have 20% of the market hate my product. But if I said, yeah, but if the other, 40% of the market now loved it, and that got you to 14% of the market share, wouldn't you do that? So it's a really fascinating thing. Who's brave enough to find people, or who's brave enough to be willing to be hated?
You just yesterday, I was in a sales meeting. I was showing the exact same thing about love and hate. Don't care about the people who might be hating it. They are not into your core kind of an persona. If you lock your sights on it, let them be happy, and then other people will self-select. So that's always works for making sure you're understanding what do really people want and how we're going to really try to solve their elements of needs and wants and desires and dreams. I know we have only a couple of minutes more. I want to this is unusual questions. There is it's a fun question, but I want to just see what your take on it. It's a question from Glenn. Why is there braille on a drive-up ATM? I don't know. You don't need to answer that, but and it makes sense. It might be some of those couple of laws that were locked in a few years ago or something like that. Another question is this is a nice question actually by Peter. Uh, is automotive design a performance art?
A performance art.
And that's Peter Canfield.
I wonder from what perspective you mean a performance art,
So this
because
was asked before when he was RSVP in signing in.
I mean, I would say I love the word performance, and I probably use it quite often because all products have to perform. Um, and so I do find automotive for sure rooted in the quality of the performance of the product because it has a goal. Anytime there's a clear goal of a product, you can define its attributes to determine how successful it's performing in its goal, getting you A to B, or being fun to drive as an enthusiast, or carrying your gear back and forth from a road trip up north. I mean, what is the performance? And because I think we all believe we should spend our money on things that we like,
Mhm.
it's art, right? It is absolutely rooted in art. So I don't know, I just performance art, absolutely. But it's moving, it's dynamic. Automobiles are in motion, so there is a uniqueness to it. There's very few things that move like an automobile and as fast as an automobile. I mean, transportation products have this excitement to them. It's why we all love them that do love them, because they're very different than a chair that sits all the time in your living room. I mean, chairs are cool. I love chair design, but I don't see chairs going 80 miles an hour racing 300 miles an hour down the track. So I mean, I have this innate, you know, passion for moving vehicles, and I consider it art.
I like the pun intended thing about the vehicles make you move, and that movement comes from little movement or actually the emotive movement. Maybe one second last question. Is there any aspect of mobility? Means we talked about cars or fast cars, right? Means you yourself have a supercar that you yourself design, and that's a pretty unique thing. So you know about the vehicles from the let's say the muscle car mania kind of an thing. Till right now, we're talking about EVs and AVs and those architectural elements. Dave, is there any aspect of mobility that you think will never change?
Whoa. I mean, when you define it as never change, could I synthesize it down to an aspect of mobility that'll never change? I mean, at the root of it, philosophically, isn't it just our human desire to explore? I mean, that's where it all starts from, right? I want to go see and go experience, and I want to go somewhere. I mean, yeah, there's the logistics of just getting from A to B, but humans don't stay still. We have to go places and see things and interact. So it's like the root of exploration is just part of humanity. So I think as long as mobility is serving our desire to move around Earth, you're going to have, great design opportunities.
I I know you were not there. I know you were in the meeting, but you are bringing this completely a full circle right now as we started. This was essentially the route that John sir started to really talk about what aspires us to go beyond, right? It might be perseverance on Mars, it might be Tiger on some remote areas. He exactly said similar to what you are saying about our curiosity to explore and always going beyond or understanding what is beyond the horizon that's pulling us over there. And I think in a great uh,
That's so poetic. I love it.
that's how we started, and now you literally brought it in, even though you were not in the first session as such. I know we have to let everybody go, but one thing that I asked to Pat, I will have to ask you also: what inspires you, Dave?
Well, I just get the root of what inspires me. Um, I mean, people, I would say, are my root inspiration. Um, what inspires me to work hard and give it my everything is just my deep love and passion for God and my purpose to let let my gifts that God has given me lead me in my path in life. And I think just connecting with people through this journey we all have together. I'm so inspired by people. I love being around people. I'm a talkative person, probably as obviously as you've seen here. And I'm never bored by other people and the experiences we have. And I'm just as I grew as a designer, I think my passions kind of grew off the pencil and paper into more of the design of these experiences and the passion we have for each other and solving problems. So I'd say that's my
Who told you, Dave, you're a talkative person? You're not a talkative person. Anyway, thank you once again. I know I have to let you go and just bring this all in. So thanks you again for your insights and your storytelling abilities and for whatever you do for not just Sundberg-Ferar but for the clients that we work with. Thank you once again for the
Thank
people
you,
who
Jivak. Thank you for being able to have the stamina to MC an event like this for what are you going on 4 hours now? It's just it's amazing.
and we are doing to do this every month and we have amazing, I would say, feedback and curiosity from people to keep up doing things. So thanks for.
Absolutely. Yeah, you do an amazing job, man.
Yep. Thank you. So I think just 30 seconds more, people. Thank you for. I think most of you are still online. Thanks again for this. As Lanea had told in the chat and in the starting things too, we will make these recordings available. I will slice them up in 4 different distinct kind of let's say videos as such. So you will have, if you want to go back and take some notes. If you have any more questions, let me or Lanea know. If you want to talk about business or things we can do for your business, call me or text me anytime. You already would have our email numbers. If not, Lamia can add our cell phone numbers over there. If you want to share something, if you want to suggest a new topic, if you want to suggest a newer speaker from your industry, let us know and we will love to talk with them and see how they can bring more insights, more value, more kind of I would say provocation to our virtual design conversations as such. This is the best thing that I do for every month, and I'm looking forward to have all of you or most of you for our next installment of our virtual design conversations. And make sure you RSP for that. So it's a little bit over time, but I think we all had fun. Let's go out and start making this happen. Let's try to really make this world a little bit more beautiful and a little bit more better. Till that time, over and out.